So I had this dream that I was drowning, and I woke up from it, and it really stood out to me. And so I grabbed my journal, and I started writing down in my journal. I had this dream that I was drowning. And like most of us, I pretty much continued on at my normal pace, whatever I was doing, just at this breakneck pace that I've been on pretty much my whole life, as a high achiever, as somebody who wants to accomplish and impress and prove a lot of things to a lot of people. And about a month after that, I noticed I was having trouble with my memory. I was only 32 years old, and I'd be in conversations with people, or I'd be doing a presentation, and all of a sudden I would just like blank. And I couldn't think of a word that I wanted to say in the moment. So of course, I did what a lot of us do, and I immediately assumed that I had dementia at 32, because my great-grandmother did. And I went to Google, and I was like, you need to get off Google and go to the doctor. So I went to my doctor, and I told him what was going on, and he looked at me with kindness and compassion, and he said, maybe you're doing too much. Is that like the wrong answer for anybody else besides me? Like, too much? You misunderstood. I have a different capacity, so that's not the right answer, right? I'm getting a yes from the back of the room. That's the wrong answer, so I basically ignored him, and I continued at that pace until about a month and a half later, I ended up really sick, sicker than I had ever been in my life. I had swollen lymph nodes, the worst sore throat of my life. I completely lost my voice, which, considering what I do, is a little bit of a problem. And I did all the things I knew to do as a health coach and as somebody with a background in psychology and health science knew to do to get myself to feel better, and none of it worked. So 2 months later, I end up back at that same doctor's office on Valentine's Day, when I'm supposed to be at dinner with my husband, and instead he's sitting next to me as I sit across from the same doctor who 4 months ago had said, maybe you're doing too much. And at this point, I was even sicker than I had been 2 months earlier. And he looked at me across his desk, and again, with kindness and compassion, not condemnation, he said to me, Rachel, would you say this was brought on by work and by something external? Or would you say you brought this on yourself? And as I was sitting there thinking about that question, I wanted to blame my job. Who wants to blame their job, like right away? It's like, it is all their fault. It's their fault. Like, you don't understand, they run me through all these meetings, and I don't have a say, and da-da-da-da-da, they just drive me to the ground, and I'm exhausted. It's their fault. But I knew in the moment that I would be lying if I said that. That I had gotten myself into this place because my whole life I had believed that love and acceptance were on the other side of achievement. And so I worked myself into the ground just trying to earn my way so that people would accept and love and include me, because I thought that if I achieved enough and if I impressed enough people, that would be the thing that would get me there. So as I'm sitting across from him, he says, I'm going to test you for something called Epstein-Barr virus. I'm like, what the heck is that? So it turns out it's an acute form of mono. And the test came back positive. And so I had essentially burned out at 32 years old. And the next few months were some of the most transformational months of my entire life, because I had to get really honest with myself about some things that I had just been pushing under the rug because it was easier to be in denial than it was to face the truth. And so over the next couple of months, there were certain things that happened that, looking back on, I'm not all that proud of. Like, this is my niece Raleigh, and I missed her second birthday party because I was so sick. And I was on the couch, and my husband was sending me pictures from her party. And I was sitting there in tears thinking to myself, this is not what I want my life to look like. Like, I had muted every other aspect of my life so that I could put work above everything else, because that's where I found my greatest worth and identity and sense of meaning. But it caused me to miss out on moments that matter. We didn't make up that Valentine's dinner until May. Valentine's Day is in February, so do the math on that. And I remember I sat across from my husband, and for the first time all year, I looked at him and I said, how are you doing? And he's not someone who's overly emotional, and he looked at me and he just said, it's been hard. Like, it's been hard. And so as I think about that season, and I think about missing moments like that, and I think about the outreach that really generous friends made during that time, the burnout experience I had was a gift. I was literally muted, completely lost my voice for a period of time, and I had people reaching out to me to speak truth. I want you to think about how you would respond if you received a text message that began with the words, "Warning, unsolicited observation coming." Who wants to read that message? Followed by a page and a half of text. I'd rather not. But I did, and it was from my friend Kara, and she said, Rachel, you post so often about not caring so much about achievement and about slowing down, but you yourself rarely seem to slow down. And what she said next was an absolute gut punch. She said, you don't seem content or fulfilled. I've never felt so exposed. As somebody who's an achiever who wants to impress people, that's the ultimate, to have someone be like, no, I see right through this. You're not happy, are you? And I wasn't, and I think it's so important for us to be willing to unmute the truth and to let other people speak into us, to be willing to receive it instead of get defensive in response to it. But for so many of us, it's easier to show up like this, isn't it? We're like, I'm fine. Behind the scenes, we're really, really struggling, and we're not doing fine, right? And we need help, and we're not expressing what we think or what we want or what we feel at work or at home. It's like we're muting ourselves. We're living our lives on mute. By the way, if you ever have a dream that you're drowning, you don't want to pay attention to that. That is like your body's signal, not so subtly, of saying hey, you're about to go down a not good road. Pay attention to this. Anyone ever had your body send you a signal that you didn't pay attention to and then later on it reared its ugly head? Yeah, we've been there. And so that's what happened in the situation. So we mute ourselves, we silence ourselves. And there's a woman named Dana Jack out of Harvard University, and she has studied this concept called self-silencing for years, and specifically related to women. And we have this tendency, again, to not speak up and ask what we want, or to share our feelings or our desires or our opinions or our thoughts, because we're afraid that we'll be too much, or we're afraid of what someone's going to think of us if we do. So I want to invite you to take a moment. I'm going to ask you to, if you could make two fists, just hold them up in the air for me, all right? Now you can drop those fists in your lap. What we're about to do, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to just have an honest moment of self-reflection. I'm going to read you 10 statements. As I read these statements, I'm going to invite you to lift a finger for each one of these that feels true for you. And then, because we're talking about being courageous here today, that's one of the things that we're talking about doing, I'm going to invite you into an experience of shared vulnerability. And when we're finished reading all those 10 statements, I'm going to invite you, if you're comfortable, and even if you're a little uncomfortable, I'm okay with that, to open your eyes and lift your hands up, to look around the room, because one of the reasons we silence ourselves is because we think we're the only one. I'm the only one that deals with that thing. I can't talk about that. I'm the only one that has that insecurity. No, you're not. We just don't talk about it. So that's going to be the invitation after we go through and read these. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, put your hands in your lap, and if you hear a statement that feels true for you, I want you to just be honest with yourself and raise a finger as you're sitting with your hands in your lap. All right. Number 1, doing things just for myself is selfish. I feel dissatisfied with myself because I should be able to do all the things people are supposed to be able to do these days. That's number 2. Number 3, I tend to judge myself by how I think other people see me. Number 4, often I look happy enough on the outside that inwardly I feel angry and rebellious. Number 5, I don't speak my feelings in an intimate relationship when I know they will cause disagreement. Number 6, caring means choosing to do what the other person wants even when I want to do something different. Number 7, I find it hard to know what I think and feel because I spend a lot of time thinking about how other people are feeling. Number 8, when I make decisions, other people's thoughts and opinions influence me more than my own thoughts and opinions. Number 9, caring means putting the other person's needs in front of my own. And number 10, one of the worst things I can do is be selfish. All right. I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. If you're comfortable, I invite you to just raise your hands with whatever numbers you counted on them. You just put our hands up. Can we just look around the room, not for judgment, but just like for a moment. Just for a moment, that there's at least one. There's at least one of these things. Right? And what a courageous act to be willing to do that. Don't you feel a little bit less alone knowing that like you're not the only one that feels those things or that does those things? Like we don't talk about it. I can't help but think of the phrase, we don't talk about it, and want to jump into Encanto and be like, we don't talk about broom. No. Like that's, I cannot help myself. Disney. So our goal is to not self-silence. Those are all behaviors on an assessment around self-silencing, that if we say yes to those things, those are examples of self-silencing. And so what we want to do today is we want to shift away from that, and we want to get unmuted. And when I think of an expression of being unmuted, I think of a peacock. Because a peacock is like, I am here, and I am proud to be seen, and I am confident. Not necessarily cocky, but I'm just here. I'm willing to be seen in all my beauty and glory, and I'm not apologizing for it. And to me, that's what the unmuted life is about. That's what the unmuted life is about. So you're going to have the chance now to unmute yourselves. This is going to involve your phones and another person. So this is an exercise called the Inside Scoop. This was something that was started at the U.S. Surgeon General's office as a way to foster trust building and connection. They found that they did a lot of exercises that were trying to build trust and trying to build connection, but none of them really did a whole lot. And so what they started to do is at the start of their meetings, they would give one person the floor for 5 minutes. And what they would invite them to do is share through pictures something about their life that's meaningful or important to them. That's as specific as the prompt got. And so each meeting, there would be a different person who would rotate out that would have the opportunity to do that. And there was a story that was shared of one of the people who shared was a U.S. Marine. And so they figured when it was his turn, he's just going to talk about his military service. But instead, he shared a picture of his dad and how he could see his dad's musical talent come out in his son. And he shared a picture of his mother and how whenever he was struggling, he could remember and rely on the strength of his mother. And as he's sharing these stories with his colleagues, he starts to get teary-eyed, and they start to get teary-eyed, and they had this moment of deep connection in 5 minutes. They got to know him better in that 5-minute span than they might have for months or years before. This is the power of getting to connect with the soul behind the role. And so you all are going to have the opportunity to do this. I'm going to let you know how it's going to work, and then I'm going to tell you a story so you'll have time to find your picture as I'm telling my story. So you're going to be buddied up with one other person. So this only works in pairs. So don't do a trio, or it's not going to work. All right, so if you'll find one other person, and I'll tell you when you're going to do it. I'll give you the cue. And what you're going to do is, let's say, Sarah, right? And who's next to Sarah? Sheila. Okay, so Sarah, let's say you go first. And you'll be like, well, it was my birthday yesterday, and my family's here in Atlanta with me, because it was Sarah's birthday yesterday, by the way. And so Sarah might share, you're going to share a picture of something or someone that helps you to feel alive or joyful or energized in some way. So any picture that represents an experience or a person or a place that makes you feel energized or alive or joyful. And then you're going to have a whole minute to share that with Sheila. And then there's going to be a countdown clock on the screen that's going to be counting down 60 seconds. At the 60-second mark, a bell's going to ding, a school bell. I'm married to a teacher. A school bell's going to ding, all right? And then you're going to switch. And then Sheila is going to take your phone and share with Sarah, this is the thing that makes you feel energized, alive, or joyful. And then when the minute is up, you'll hear the bell ding again, and then we'll take a seat, and then we'll bring some of your voices in, and we'll invite you to share something that came up. There's some really cool stuff and coincidences that happen in these conversations that I cannot even plan, but it's really neat. So just be ready for an opportunity to connect. So, all right, and begin.
On her knee, couldn't play basketball, and I'm sitting there thinking like, oh God, I made the right decision,
And I remember about 4 years ago, I was talking with a coach named Lori, and she was going through a coaching program, needed a guinea pig. I was like, I'll be a guinea pig, okay. So we're sitting out at a Starbucks, and we're getting to this question around the essence of who I am. And there were two questions she presented to me. And the questions were, what shows up when I do? What qualities do I bring into a room? We all show up with something, right? We can think of people in our lives that show up with stuff we don't like. We're like, the second that person walks in the room, they suck the energy out of it. Everyone can think of somebody like that? And then there's people that walk in the room and you're like, oh my gosh, everything just got lighter and brighter. I feel better already just because you're here, right? We can think of that. Just someone's presence can shift the energy in a room that much. So whether we know it or not, we bring energy into a room, and we bring certain qualities into the room. So she asked me these questions, and I jotted them down. She said, I want you to write down the names of like 10 people that you know across different areas of your life. So I wrote down these names. And she said, I want you to pick one of them. So I pointed to my friend Kara, a different Kara. Apparently all the Karas in my life are truth tellers. Any Karas in the room? So she goes, okay, I want you to call her now. And I want you to ask her these two questions, and you can't explain to her why you're calling her, and you can't elaborate on these two questions. It's like super awkward. So I called Kara, and I was like, hey, I have two questions for you. This is so weird. And I said, what shows up when I do? What qualities do I bring into a room? And as she was saying, the words that she was saying, I was jotting them down, and over the next couple of weeks, I reached out to about 12 to 15 other people across different areas of my life, colleagues, friends, family members, mentors, coaches, and I asked them these same two questions, and I started to take an inventory and look at the list, and I started to notice some common themes that were emerging, and one thing that was very apparent to me was that all those words I just showed you about how I perceive myself, that none of those words came up. None of those words came up. Instead, these are the kind of things that people said. They said a calming presence, an excited energy, both of them. Funny, nurturing, authentic, courageous, that you're grounding and uplifting and real and refreshing and comforting and disarming. And I had words upon words, dozens of words, and I started to notice that these were the themes about what people were saying about me. This was what my essence was. This wasn't me when I was trying to achieve. You know what nobody said? You're so impressive. That, like the thing that I'm after, like this is really what I hope I bring into the world. And so as I allowed people to reflect back these things to me, I started to get clarity, and I started to challenge the narratives I carried about myself my whole life about how I saw myself and who I thought I was. And you have the ability to do this. Every single one of you has the ability to do this. It's awkward. It's a little uncomfortable. It might even feel a bit self-serving. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's not. But it's something that you can use to help get clarity, to get to the core of what it is that you bring into the spaces that you occupy. Now, it's important to be careful about who you ask these questions to, right? There's certain people that you're like, I don't really want to know what they have to say. Start with the people that you know are going to be nice and honest. And then if you want to grow a little bit more and there's people that you feel a little bit safer with, you could say, hey, look, I'm trying to grow in some ways. And even the people that are your biggest challengers would probably have something kind to say about you that you wouldn't even imagine they would say. I think back to a card my mother sent me 4 years ago when I think about the importance of doing practices like this, of letting people reflect back the goodness that they see in us. And it was 4 years ago, she sent me this card and it has a peacock on it because she knows I like peacocks. And the quote is by somebody named Kobe Yamada. And it says, I only wish you could see what I see when I look at you. And then in the inside, she wrote, my lovely daughter, be kind to yourself. And I've kept it for 4 years because it was that meaningful. And it's such an important reminder that we need when we're so hard on ourselves. If we were to take a moment and allow the people that love us the most to reflect back what they see in us, we'd feel a little more confident. We'd feel a little bit better about ourselves.